The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your patience as we needed to switch over to a slightly different platform to make sure that all community members who wanted to attend were able to. If you could raise your hand using the chat window, there's a button there that allows you to raise your hand, just so that I can make sure that everyone is hearing and seeing me. Excellent. I see several hands going up. Thank you. And if you will once again raise your hand and let me know if you can see the presentation as well. It should be a slide that currently says the community meeting will begin in just a few moments. If you'll raise your hand and let me know if you can see that. Great. I see several hands going up. Thank you very much. My name is Akeisha Craven Howell, and I lead the district's Office of Student Assignment and School Choice. And I will be sharing some information with you this evening. We are in a webinar that is being recorded. And as I say that, I am reminding myself to do exactly that. Okay. So we are being recorded. We have 98 attendees, and this webinar allows a maximum of 1,001. And so I imagine that we will continue to get a few people rolling in even as we get started. Just a little norm setting as we get started this evening. Because we will have a large number of participants, the number continues to grow. We're already at 102. The webcams and microphones this evening will be limited to CMS staff, just to help us to manage the conversation a little bit. As I go through the presentation, however, at the end of kind of each section, I will stop and pause for some question and answer. And so what I would ask you do is to use the chat function in your control panel to submit questions. And my team will be monitoring those. And I will pause to answer as many of them as I can. I do ask that if you have just comments or feedback, that you would hold that. We will be distributing a link to a survey via the principals, and we will be asking for your input and feedback there, any comments that you have. So just for context, as I imagine there are some folks who are joining us this evening who were not able to join us for our meeting in January. The need for relief at Providence Spring Elementary is something that was discussed heavily during our 2018-19 process to establish the Ray Farms attendance area. We did not make the relief part of that conversation, but there was a commitment to revisit it in the 2019-20 school year, and that's exactly what we are doing. Back in January, we had a conversation with the community just to share the opportunity and get some feedback on how we might go about providing that relief. This evening's meeting will share 3 scenarios that was informed by the community's input back in January. And we'll spend some time just walking you through each of those as it relates to the board's priorities, and most certainly our goal of providing relief. And then we'll also share next steps for continued engagement. I think it's always helpful just to ground ourselves in the board's policy around student assignment. This is absolutely what governs my team and my work as we identify potential new scenarios for a school's attendance area. The board's policy JCA requires that all boundaries be contiguous. That is, that we must draw an unbroken line, whatever shape it happens to form, it must be an unbroken line around a given school. The board also identifies 4 priorities that it uses to make its decision and to assess the scenarios. That's home to school distance, the extent to which we can keep feeder patterns intact, so students moving from elementary to middle to high school together, socioeconomic diversity, and utilization. In addition to those priorities for making their assessment and decision, the board also asked the superintendent and therefore staff to consider a few other things. The feasibility of achieving goals through means other than changing assignment. Certainly asking us to consider keeping entire neighborhoods assigned to the same schools, being mindful of projections for population growth and demographic shifts. And as we go through each of the scenarios this evening, we'll share some of the data that we've been considering related to population growth. And then you see just a couple other considerations listed there on the page. Just a little bit about the process. So the superintendent, through his designees, which is my team and myself, gathers community input. We always want to make sure that the community has an active role in helping us determine these types of changes. Your input from January helped to inform multiple scenarios, which we will go over with you this evening. And we'll seek feedback both through your questions tonight as well as through a survey. Your feedback, along with data, will be shared with the superintendent and with the board. And then the board also has an opportunity to hear directly from the community in a public hearing. That is currently scheduled for the May 26th board meeting. Ultimately, the superintendent will make a recommendation to the board, and the board will vote on the superintendent's recommendation. Typically, that happens in May or June, but no later than November, according to the board's policy. And the goal is to provide at least one school year between when the decision is made and when the decision would become effective. I'd like to share, before we get into the scenarios, some data about our schools currently. So as we look at both McKee Road and Providence Spring Elementary, you can see in the first column of this table the number of classrooms at each of those schools. So 31 classrooms at McKee Road and 36 at Providence Spring. And then approximately the number of students that school can accommodate. Now we know that as class size in K-3 is becoming smaller based on state law, that these numbers 620 and 720 are a little bit of a high estimate of what a school can actually support. And so you see that today McKee Road has 0 mobile units and Providence Spring has 8. The current enrollment at McKee Road for the 1920 school year is 584 students, and it's 961 at Providence Spring. As we look at 5 and 10-year enrollment projections for both of these schools, we see both of them experiencing a slight increase over the next few years, followed by a decrease over the subsequent few years, so the next 10 years out, looking at the year 2030. The bottom 2 rows of this chart are Crestdale Middle and J.M. Robinson. I shared these just because these are the 2 schools, the 2 middle schools that McKee and Providence Spring continue to. As a part of these considerations, we are not looking at a change in middle school or high school assignment. We are limiting these scenarios to elementary school. One of the reasons for that, as you can see at J.M. Robinson, their current enrollment is 1,215 in a school that has a capacity for just under 1,100, and it is not a school whose site can accommodate mobiles. I want to pause here to see if there are any questions about the policy or the process before we get into the 3 scenarios. So there is one question. It says, how is a drop in enrollment predicted when the population increases each year? And so we are looking specifically at school age population. We're looking specifically at school age population. We know that particularly in the Providence Spring attendance area, these are well established communities. There's not a lot of undeveloped land. There is some undeveloped land in and around the McKee Road attendance area, but most of that was assigned to the Ray Farms School, which will open next year. The 10-year projections in particular are looking at lots of data, both trend data for CMS, as well as demographic data, projected development. It also looks, interestingly, at the age of home and the assessed value of a home, which helps us to get at things like turnover and the extent to which young families are moving into a neighborhood or not. So, of course, these are just projections, but they are based on a number of factors that give us confidence that they are directionally correct. There's a question about the effective date of this change. The effective date would be for the fall 21 school year. There is a question about the boundary for J.M. Robinson and had it experienced a change? Yes. So last year when we established the boundary for the Ray Farms K-8 school, that pulled some students out of J.M. Robinson. And we were able to then provide relief to Community House by assigning some students who currently attend Community House to J.M. Robinson. There is a question about, is the curriculum the same from Providence Spring to McKee Elementary? Certainly in English language arts and math for K-5, the district has an adopted curriculum that all elementary schools implement, so that would be consistent across both schools. And then there is a question about grandfathering. So typically when there is an assignment change, we will grandfather students who are in the terminal year. So in this case, for example, a student who would be a fifth grader in the 21-22 school year would be allowed to remain at the current school and not need to be reassigned. Okay. I'm going to move us into looking at the scenarios. However, we will have a transcript of the questions, and if there are questions that we were not able to answer this evening on the webinar, we commit to providing written responses to those questions and posting them on the website. As we get into the scenarios, it's important to remember a few things. One, that no decisions have been made. Two, that these are scenarios that were informed by community input, but that as a planning team, we have looked at and discussed. This is the beginning of the process. It is a very iterative process, as I shared in our initial conversation in January. And so this is a place to begin conversations, not to end them. So our first scenario, scenario blue, would assign the portion of Providence Spring Elementary, which currently attends J.M. Robinson, to McKee Road Elementary. You can see, if you can see my cursor, this area in purple here is currently assigned to Providence Spring. It would be assigned to McKee Road for elementary school and continue its assignment to J.M. Robinson for middle school. As we look at this scenario based on the board's priorities, in terms of an intact feeder pattern, it does represent a positive because it removes the split feed to middle school that currently exists at Providence Spring. In terms of proximity, it is a negative. It will increase the home to school distance for some students who are being assigned from Providence Spring to McKee. There's really no change in SES diversity for either school. In terms of utilization, it increases the utilization at McKee Road from 102% to just under 150% and decreases the utilization at Providence Spring from 133 to 95%. One thing that I failed to mention in my introduction is that we are looking at McKee Road to provide relief, not because McKee Road has classrooms that are unused. Instead, McKee Road has space for 10 to 16 mobile units on its campus, and Providence Spring, which currently has 8 mobile units, does not have space for any additional mobile units. So all of the relief that we are providing at McKee Road is via the addition of mobile units to that school. And so just some additional data at the bottom. You see again the school planning capacity. That first number, the 620 for McKee Road, is the capacity in the core facility, so in the brick and mortar building. The 940 that you see beside it is what we are able to accomplish by adding up to 16 mobiles on that campus. Similarly, for Providence Spring, you see 720, and then beside it, 880, which is the additional capacity with the 8 mobiles. I will pause here for questions specific to scenario blue. So there's a question about the average increase in length of distance. We have not yet done that analysis, but we will identify several addresses within the portion that is under consideration in this scenario to be assigned to McKee Road so that we can do that assessment and provide it to you. There's a question regarding the busyness and the traffic on McKee Road, the commitment for a police officer or crossing guard in the morning and afternoon, and that is certainly something that we can explore. There's a question to seek clarification about the use of mobiles at McKee Road. Yes, all of these scenarios will require the addition of mobile units at McKee Road Elementary. Okay. There's a question about when will students be going to McKee Road in the blue scenario. For all of these scenarios, students would make the change in the fall 21 school year. So the school year that begins in fall of 21. And then there's a question about the transcript. So we will post the recording of this presentation as well as the presentation itself and any questions we need to answer in a written format on the planning website. And I will provide that link to you at the end of this presentation. Okay. So the next scenario, scenario orange, moves the northernmost portion of the Providence Spring attendance area to McKee Road. You can see this purple area here. It's currently a part of the Providence Spring attendance area, and then it will move to McKee Road. Is that in here? Okay. Fine, Daddy.
He's in the back. He's down there. He's in the garage.
I am sure you are all experiencing a little bit of this yourselves right now. I apologize for the interruption. So this purple section of the Providence Spring attendance area would move to McKee Road. In terms of intact feeder patterns, it creates a new split feed at McKee Road by adding Crestdale Middle School. So right now, all of McKee Road continues to J.M. Robinson. By adding that portion of the Providence Spring attendance area to McKee Road, you will now have some students who continue to Crestdale Middle. In terms of proximity, there's a slight decrease in home to school distance for that group of students if they shift to McKee Road. Again, no change in SCS diversity, but we do have, again, the same increase in utilization at McKee Road and a reduction of utilization at Providence Spring. Again, at the table below, you see the specifics of the numbers of scenario orange. And I will pause here for questions specific to scenario orange. Okay, we have some questions coming in. There's a question that's not specific to orange, but it asks if we would consider grandfathering 4th and 5th grade. The board has sometimes done that in the past. We would want to take a look at how doing so might delay the needed relief to Providence Spring. There's a question about the bus time. We will do additional analysis on both the distance from several points within each of these scenarios, as well as ask our transportation team to provide a routing analysis as well. There's a question about reducing Providence Springs utilization to under 100 and maximizing the use of mobiles at McKee Road. And might we consider more of a balance where Providence Spring may still need to utilize some mobiles, but does not max out the 8 mobiles that it currently uses. There's a question about the 16 mobiles at McKee Road. In January, I shared a number that was 10. Since then, our facilities team has gone out and done additional site analysis and believe that we may be able to get as many as 16. Okay. Okay. So I will move next to the third and final scenario. This is the yellow scenario, and it is a paired school. So in this scenario, rather than changing any part of the existing attendance areas, we combine them into a single attendance area and make one campus K2 and the other 3-5. Because Providence Spring is a 2-story facility, and we have requirements about K2 students being on the first floor, it necessitates that McKee Road would serve as the K2 campus and Providence Spring as the 3-5 campus. So students who currently attend both schools would now attend McKee Road for K2 and then Providence Spring for 3-5. Again, there would still be no change in middle school assignment. When we look at the numbers, well, let me go through the priorities first. So really no change in the feed to middle school. It will increase home to school distance for a larger number of students, whether that be in your K2 or 3-5, because there's 2 campuses involved now. Again, no change to SES diversity. And we do increase utilization at McKee Road and reduce utilization at Providence Spring, but not by nearly as much as the first 2 scenarios. When we looked at the grade level enrollment for both McKee Road and Providence Spring, we saw significantly larger 4th and 5th grade classes at both schools than kindergarten and first grade classes. And so that is why you see that we don't get that much relief out of Providence Spring, because with that campus serving students 3-5 and those cohorts being the larger in the schools, we simply aren't able to reduce the population as much. As we look at the 10-year grade level projections, we see that trend continuing, larger 4th and 5th grade classes, cohorts rather, than the younger grades. So I will pause here for questions specific to the yellow scenario. There's a question about how a paired school would affect students in extensions classes. I do not have the answer to that question, but I know that we do currently have 2 elementary pairs. And so I will certainly follow up to see how that is currently being handled at those two schools. Related to the pairing, there's this question about how bell schedules work for parents who would have a student at both campuses. What I can tell you is during the planning year for our current paired schools, we did a lot of work with families on just those types of questions. So what the bell schedule might look like, is there a shared after-school program or an after-school program at both campuses, and really work with families to develop proposals for answers to those kinds of questions that work best. I believe at one of our paired schools, the bell schedule is about 15 minutes apart because the schools themselves are less than 2 miles apart. And so that 15 minutes intended to provide parents, especially who, may be dropping children off, the time to get between campuses. But those are questions that we can absolutely work with the community to solve. But we have precedent of solving just those kinds of needs for 2 current elementary pairs. There's a question about the PADEA program that exists at Providence Spring Elementary, and would that program shift to McKee Road as well if in the yellow scenario? I do not have an answer to that question, but I am committed to talking about the implications of that with the principals to get an answer for you. There's a question that says, in this scenario, what would the middle schools be? Middle school assignment would not change, and so the middle school boundaries would remain the same. So whatever your current middle school assignment is, it would be the same in the K2 3-5 pairing. How would grandfathering work in the yellow scenario? There would be no grandfathering in the yellow scenario. All K2 students would attend the K2 campus at McKee Road, beginning with the fall 21 school year, and all 3-5 students would attend the Providence Spring campus, beginning with the 3-5 school year. Okay. There's a question about 2 PTAs in the paired school scenario. Again, these are the types of things that we would work with families to determine whether there be 2 PTAs, 2 SLCs. I know, for example, in at least one of our current elementary paired schools, they chose to have a single SLT with parents and teachers from all grade levels, K5. Represented on the single SLT. Okay. I'm just scanning through to see if there are additional questions. Okay. So let me just share a little bit with you about next steps. So the recording of today's meeting, as well as the PowerPoint presentation and a link to a survey. Actually, I'm not going to put the link to the survey on the website because I do want to limit it to these two communities. So I will send that link to the survey out via the principals. But the recording of this meeting, the presentation, as well as a transcript of any questions that we were not able to answer during the webinar this evening, will be posted on the Planning Services webpage by Monday morning. And you can see here how to get to that webpage. If you go to cms.k12.nc.us and click on the link for departments and go to the Planning Services department, you'll be able to find this information. I will be giving a report to the board on May 26th during the board meeting. At that time, a public hearing is also scheduled. I will send out the information again through principals about how you can go about signing up to speak during the public hearing. During that May 26th report that I will share with the board, I will be sharing with them preliminary information from the survey. So we will leave the survey open for the duration of this work, but I will likely take a look at it on around May 21st or 22nd to just pull the data that we have up to that point so that I can begin to prepare it for an update to the board on May 26th. This will be the first update. There will be others. And so I say that to encourage you to take the survey as soon as you can so we can share that information with the board. At this time, there are no additional community engagements scheduled, but I anticipate that there will be, but those would come after the May 26th board meeting. And again, I will communicate the date, time, and how to access the meeting via the school principals. I want to thank you for your active participation in this process. I know it's a little bit awkward to do it this way, to have pauses so that I can scan the chat window and the questions, and to also have my 5-year-old begging to get into my office. So I appreciate your grace there. I just do want to remind you that we are at the beginning of this process. I know there are lots of questions and concerns. I am committed to keeping you up to date, sharing as much information as possible, and also just considering all of your feedback and questions throughout this process. So I thank you again for joining us this evening. Please look for that information on the website no later than Monday morning, as well as an email from your principal with the link to the deck. A link to the survey, as well as information about how to sign up if you would like to speak during the May 26th public hearing. So thank you again, and I will end the webinar at this time. Thank you.